Finn Gregory, who joins us now on the line. Richard, absolutely phenomenal work then that you've continued to do when it comes to this one. And of course, all those journalists as well that are part of this, including the Reserve Bank and etc. It really tells a formidable story. Allow me to be a conspiracy theorist for this very first question. Is he really dead?
You know what? I think so. I think we've had as definitive answers as we can get. There's a death certificate that's been issued by the police. I happened to be in Omanus on the day that Marcus Jooste tragically committed suicide, and I went to the spot where it happened, and something very violent and quite gory happened there. You know, were Marcus Jooste to want to fake his own death, to pull a Thabo Bester, there would have been far easier ways to do it than in a public place like a beach.
Yeah. This segment is meant to speak about justice, ultimately, right? Justice being served in many ways. But some might feel, well, he's now committed suicide, so he doesn't necessarily get to serve the time for what has been done here. How do you portray, or how do you try to portray that element of justice actually being served when he isn't there to really serve it?
Well, look, I think that's going to depend on your perspective. If you were somebody who invested heavily in Steinhof and you lost a lot of your money, you know, there's no justice that can really be done until you've had your money back and until the executives who were responsible have been fully punished for it. And so, yes, for someone like that, there may be an element of justice denied. You know, on the other hand, what we're talking about is a massive case where the wheels of justice have been turning, if somewhat slower than we would have liked, and executives are going to jail. And what it hopefully means is that we'll see fewer of these cases. You know, there's going to be fewer executives, fewer politicians, for example, people who are involved in corrupt practices, who are going to be tempted to put their hand in the till, because we've shown that our authorities can actually act on it.
Was it difficult to try and portray this in such a way that it wasn't just entirely biased to being completely negative and against Marcus Jooste, which of course he is the antagonist in all of this, but still you don't want to be almost belligerent and unfair to him and just throw, you know, dispersion. So needing to kind of show some decorum as well, especially knowing that he's now passed away.
Yeah, look, in the first 3 episodes, that's what we really endeavored to do. You know, he always denied everything. He always had an excuse. He always said that he was the victim of a business deal that had gone wrong in Austria, and another business person had sort of had a smear campaign against him. He claimed all sorts of things. So we went into it in good faith, offering him the ability to put his side of the story forward. We said, you know, okay, let's give you a bit of you know, your say. And he always just ignored us, dismissed us. Not even his lawyers would respond to us. And so we had to speak to the people around him. We tried to give him a fair shake. We tried to speak to people we knew were still friendly with him, to, you know, people who might speak to his character if they had something positive to say. And I've got to be honest, we just almost overwhelmingly got some pretty damning responses. And so that's the material that we were left with to include.
Yeah, very significant and important to be able to get the story right, I suppose, and tell all sides. Have you been able to speak to the family in putting this part of it together as well?
We had some contact with some aspects of the family early on who declined to participate. We didn't speak to the family directly. Of course, we reached out at all times to try and engage with the family, but they've chosen not to engage with us on this. And I guess understandably so. Yeah.
You've added a few new voices as well when it comes to some of the commentary as well. I mean, you also get to speak to the Reserve Bank Governor, Lesetja Kganyago, in here as well. Let's just talk a little bit more about that and just how much it creates a fullness of the story.
Well, I think one of the things that took a lot of people by surprise is that the Reserve Bank was the first of our authorities to act in a big way against Marcus Jooste. It was about a month after the first 3 episodes aired back in September 2022. About a month after that, the Reserve Bank froze 1.4 billion rands worth of Marcus Jooste's assets. So it was a big move. It was a strong move. It showed that finally things were turning. Of course, things had been happening in the background for some time. You know, we'd always been told when we were working on the first episodes by people behind the scenes, look, things are happening. Arrests will be made. Just bear with us. We can't tell you when, but it will happen eventually. And so after we released the first episodes, we'd like to think that maybe we had something to do with that process being accelerated a little bit. And so the Reserve Bank was the first to act, but then also the JSE acted, the
Yeah.
NP acted, the Hawks acted. So it was really great to be able to get the Reserve Bank governor, Mr. Kanyako, to speak to us, from the horse's mouth, as it were, and tell us what was going on in the lead up to that.
It's so important to get the story right, and I keep making note of that because it's ultimately what history will look back at and look back on. I mean, if you go on to another series that speaks about a bank fraud or fraud that is currently at play, and it actually is playing on Netflix like right now, and it's Wirecard. One of the things about that series as well is really just about trying to ensure that they tell the story correctly, and there's so many different elements to the fraud that was ultimately created there. How important is it to have the right context, the right people? And I speak about people because you've got the likes of Rob Rose, Alec Hogg, Paulie van Wyk, who's all in this story as well, people who followed it so intently.
I think it's critical. Something like this, you can't get the story wrong. And that's for a couple of reasons. And firstly, we need to make sure that our audience is understanding what it's all about. I've said that when I was first approached to work on this project, I didn't think I was the natural choice because I'm just not very good at finances. I'm not the smartest guy when it comes to that stuff. But pretty early on, I decided to kind of lean into that aspect and realize, well, look, I'm speaking to people who are real experts in this stuff, who do know the stuff backwards. If I can just keep on asking the questions that enable them to answer it in a way that I can understand, and if I can package that for an audience, or our team can package that for an audience in a way that leads them to the same understanding, then that will be half the battle won, So I think it was really important to make sure we got the story right, but explained it in a way that was accessible.
Yeah.
Because, that was really Marcus Jooste and his accomplices' sort of modus operandi, make it as confusing as possible, as many layers to the fraud as possible, to make it very difficult for people to unpack. But then the other element, of course, is that, we're dealing with some high-profile people. We're making claims about theft and embezzlement and all sorts of things. From a legal standpoint, we had to make sure that we could get that right. Otherwise, we'd get sued out of existence. So it went through two sets of lawyers who were very rigorous in checking everything we had done all the way through. Okay. And when they were happy with what we were saying, we went ahead. And of course, we knew that we were pretty watertight. There haven't been any legal repercussions.
So the wheels of justice turn. They just turn very slowly. Do you think more arrests might be coming from what you've uncovered so far?
I would put some money on that, yes.
If that is the case, then this is not even over, right? The story is actually not completely over at this stage. What do you think the Steinhof scandal will be remembered for? Is it ultimately just going to be that one man, or really just a whole saga?
I think it will always be known as Marcus Jooste masterminding a fraud on a scale that we've never seen in this country before and have seldom seen anywhere else in the world. So his name was always going to be inextricably linked with this. What I'd like to think is that the story will also have an element of that justice was done to the best extent that it could be done. It may not have prevented the fraud from happening in the first place, but eventually our authorities were able to show that they could investigate, they could prosecute, they could put people behind bars, which I think is something important. I think as South Africans, we've lost a lot of hope and faith in our institutions to be able to do their jobs to that extent, to prosecute to that extent. And this, I'm hopeful, is a case that will show that it is possible.
Certainly going to be important. Richard, what else are you working on? You're always doing something.
Well, at these early stages, it's always, of course, very much under wraps. You'll hear about it when the rest of the world does.
Well, we hope to get you on when we do hear more. But thank you so much for this, uncovering truth, really detailing a story that is very important. South Africa's economy. Let's remember that a lot of people's pension funds were even invested in Steinhof. So it was massive, really, for the country as well. Richard Finn Gregory, appreciate the time this morning. Thank you so much. Steinheist, the director of that docu-series.